It was a chilly October evening when Emily and her friends drove up the narrow, winding road that led to the old Whitmore house. The air was thick with mist, and the trees along the roadside twisted unnaturally, their bare branches scratching against each other like claws. Nobody in town spoke fondly of the Whitmore estate. Some called it cursed. Others whispered about shadows that moved on their own. But Emily, always drawn to the mysterious and unexplained, insisted they explore it. As they approached, the house emerged from the fog like a giant, frozen in time. Its windows were dark, some cracked, revealing glimpses of rooms long abandoned. The front door hung slightly ajar, creaking gently with the wind, almost inviting them inside. As they stepped onto the porch, a cold draft rushed past, carrying with it the faint smell of smoke and something far more sinister: decay. A sudden thud echoed from within the house, as if the building itself had exhaled a warning. Emily hesitated, her heart pounding, but curiosity overcame fear. She pushed the door open. Inside, the air was thick and heavy, almost alive. The walls were lined with portraits whose eyes seemed to follow every movement, and an old grandfather clock in the corner ticked unevenly, as though counting down to something. Every floorboard groaned under their weight, and with each step, a chill ran down their spines. Then they heard it. Faint whisperings from the staircase. It wasn't the wind. It was something else. Something waiting. Something watching. Emily's flashlight flickered, and for a brief moment they all saw a shadow move across the hallway, a shadow that didn't belong to any of them. And at that moment, they realized that the Whitmore house had been waiting for visitors long before they arrived. Emily and her friends froze as the shadow disappeared into the darkness. The whispering grew louder, echoing through the empty hallways, though no one could tell where it was coming from. Each word was unintelligible, like a voice speaking from another world, but it sent chills straight through their bones. "Maybe we shouldn't be here," muttered Mark, the most cautious of the group, his voice barely above a whisper. But Emily shook her head, her eyes fixed on the staircase. "Just a little further," she insisted. "I need to see what's upstairs." They climbed slowly, each step echoing like a drumbeat in the silent house. On the landing, the air was icy, their breaths visible in the dim beam of their flashlights. The walls were peeling with wallpaper, and doors hung crooked on their hinges. One door, at the very end of the hallway, was slightly open. A faint light flickered from inside, though they hadn't seen any candles. Cautiously, Emily pushed it open. Inside was a nursery, abandoned for decades. Dust floated in the air, disturbed by their presence. But the most unsettling thing was the music box in the corner. It was playing. Alone. Slowly turning, its tiny ballerina spinning in rhythm to a haunting, discordant melody. Then, without warning, the door slammed shut behind them. The flashlight beams darted frantically around the room, and the whispers rose to a low, guttural growl. Shadows seemed to stretch across the walls, forming shapes that shouldn't exist. Emily's eyes widened in terror. A small, pale hand pressed against the window from the outside. Another appeared at the door. But when they looked, nothing was there. Suddenly, the music box stopped, plunging them into silence. But in that silence came a voice, soft, chilling, and unmistakably human. "You shouldn't have come." The air grew heavier, the room colder, and in that instant, Emily and her friends realized that the Whitmore house was alive, and it had claimed many
before them.
Panic set in as Emily fumbled with the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. The room was sealed, and the shadows in the corners seemed to thicken, moving of their own accord. The air smelled of damp wood and something far fouler, like decay and something unseen. "Did anyone else see that?" whispered Sarah, pointing at a corner where the darkness seemed alive, writhing like a living thing. Before anyone could answer, a sudden gust of wind slammed the window shut with a deafening bang. The music box started again, its tune slower now, warped and distorted, echoing eerily through the nursery. Then came the first whisper that made them freeze in terror. Not from outside, not from the shadows, but directly inside their heads. "Leave or stay forever." Emily dropped to her knees, clutching her head as if trying to block it out. The others were equally paralyzed, and then they saw it. On the wall opposite them, appearing as if painted by an invisible hand, bloody handprints slowly spreading across the peeling wallpaper, forming words. "You are mine." The temperature dropped so sharply that their breath fogged up in the dim room. The shadows coalesced into a vague humanoid shape, towering over them, shifting, watching, waiting. Its presence was suffocating, yet they couldn't look away. Mark finally found his voice. We need to get out." As if on cue, the nursery door rattled violently. Emily tried again to open it. This time it swung open, but the hallway beyond had changed. It was no longer the familiar dusty landing. The walls were narrower, the ceiling lower, and the air wrong. Whispering voices surrounded them, coming from all directions, and somewhere deep within the house, they heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, approaching. Emily and her friends realized with sinking horror that the Whitmore house didn't just trap people. It watched them, learned them, and now it was playing with them. The hallway stretched endlessly before them, twisting in impossible angles, as if the house itself had a mind. Every step they took felt wrong, the floorboards creaking beneath them, but not in rhythm with their movement. Emily felt a surge of dread. It was as if the house were testing them, reshaping itself to trap them inside. Where are we?" Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. Her flashlight flickered, casting fleeting glimpses of the walls, which were now covered in strange symbols, carved deep into the plaster. Symbols that seemed to shift when no one was looking directly at them. Suddenly, a door slammed shut behind them. Heartbeats raced as they turned, only to find the hallway stretched further, longer, narrower, darker. The whispers returned, louder now, and this time each voice sounded different. Some were pleading, some laughing, some screaming. All of them sounded familiar, like echoes of people who had been here before. Emily shined her flashlight toward a doorway at the end of the corridor. Inside was the living room, or what used to be the living room. Furniture was overturned, cobwebs draped over everything, and in the middle of the room, an old rocking chair began to move on its own, slowly, back and forth, back and forth. A cold, heavy hand seemed to brush Emily's shoulder. She spun around, nothing. But when she looked back, the rocking chair had stopped, and in the center of the floor, scratches had appeared in the shape of a name. Emily. Panic surged. The walls themselves seemed to breathe, pulsing as if the house had a heartbeat. Every corner they turned revealed more rooms, rooms that shouldn't exist, a kitchen filled with rotting food, a nursery with dozens of dolls whose eyes followed them, and a bedroom where shadows formed twisted, screaming faces on the ceiling.
Then, from somewhere deep below, a low, guttural growl rose. The floor beneath them trembled, dust fell from the ceiling, and the air grew heavier. Emily realized with a cold certainty the house was no longer just a building. It was alive, and it was hungry. "We have to get out, now!" Mark shouted, but the hallway stretched further still. Doors they had passed before now opened to rooms they had never seen. The Whitmore house had them, completely. And somewhere, behind the walls, the whispers chuckled. "Welcome, forever."
By now, panic had consumed Emily and her friends. The house had completely taken over their sense of reality. Hallways twisted impossibly, doors led to rooms that defied logic, and the shadows, always just at the edge of vision, seemed to whisper their deepest fears aloud. Suddenly, the group was separated. One moment they were together. The next, Emily found herself alone in a long, dim corridor. Every door they had passed was gone. The whispers turned into screams, and the air thickened so much it felt like drowning. Emily stumbled into a large room. At first glance, it looked like a dining hall, but the table was set with decaying food, plates cracked and covered in dust. At the head of the table sat a figure, a dark silhouette, hunched, featureless, yet terrifyingly human. It stared at her, and then it spoke. "You belong here, all of you, forever." Emily screamed for her friends, but no sound came out. Her voice had been swallowed by the house. Shadows swirled around her, forming faces of people she had never seen, yet somehow knew. Previous victims, trapped for decades, crying silently for release. Mark and Sarah appeared in the doorway, but they were different. Their eyes were hollow, their movements stiff, as though the house had already started claiming them. Emily tried to reach them, but the shadows surged, pushing her back. The figure at the table raised an invisible hand, and the walls seemed to breathe, shrinking the room. The whispers became deafening, hundreds of voices speaking at once, all chanting the same terrifying words. "Stay, stay, stay." Emily's flashlight flickered for the last time. In the darkness, the last thing she saw was the figure leaning toward her, its form stretching impossibly. Then silence. Days later, locals would speak of the Whitmore house as if it had absorbed new residents. Cars were seen parked near the estate, but the owners never returned. Windows showed shadows moving behind the glass, and sometimes, if one listened closely, faint whispers could be heard through the walls. "Welcome to Whitmore, forever." No one ever saw Emily, Mark, or Sarah again. And the Whitmore house waits for the next curious souls, brave or foolish enough to enter.